Tonight on Bridge City News, the UCP government has announced that beginning this May long weekend, you can now have alcohol at your campsite in a provincial campground. A $13 million solar power facility in Medicine Hat is closing down. We will explain why. And for the first time in 48 years, Newfoundland and Labrador has a minority government.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The year-long tariff war between Canada and the United States is almost over. In a statement today, the Canadian government said the two sides have agreed to eliminate the tariffs within 2 days. The deal applies to the tariffs the U.S. imposed last June of 25% on imports of steel and 10% on aluminum. Canada will drop the retaliatory tariffs on steel, aluminum, and other consumer products. With the deal, the Trudeau government has agreed to end its legal case against the U.S. at the World Trade Organization on tariffs. The tariffs have disrupted supply chains and added extra costs for consumers and businesses. They were also becoming a barrier to ratifying the new North American Free Trade Pact. The May long weekend is finally upon us, and to mark the occasion, the province of Alberta is loosening its liquor laws at provincial parks and festival sites. Premier Jason Kenney says beginning this weekend, the liquor ban imposed on the 8 remaining provincial parks will be lifted. The province is also changing regulations to loosen rules for various festivals across the province. Later this summer, the new liquor rules will extend to select provincial park day use area picnic sites. Medicine Hat is pulling the plug on its $13 million solar power facility. It's been in operation for the past 5 years. The goal of the project was to test whether the technology was a good way to use the sun's heat to replace some of the natural gas to create steam at the city-owned power plant. The chairman of the city's utility committee says the project was too small and unreliable. Councillor Phil Turnbull says because it did not contribute much to the community's power needs. The city is now looking into what to do with the project by next fall. Do we still have freedom of speech, especially in our colleges and universities? Some say no. You can include the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, John Carpe, in that group. Mr. Carpe says the freedom of expression is especially challenged when it comes to pro-life.
A small campus pro-life club put up a stationary display, and it was surrounded by a loud chanting mob, holding up sheets and towels and making it impossible for any debate or conversation to take place. And even though this was clearly contrary to the university's own rules, the university took no disciplinary action against any of the students.
Watch the full interview with John Carpe discussing where we are as a society in regards to freedom of speech. That's coming up after business news. 50 years ago, the very first Southern Alberta Summer Games were hosted in Pincher Creek. From archery to soccer, the Games provide an opportunity for people of all ages to compete. To celebrate the milestone, the Games will return to Pincher Creek with a handful of events and activities taking place.
Staying with the same kind of structure that's always been to keep with the times. But then we're changing it up to add an athlete village, so every day around noon there's going to be yoga in the park. A couple nights there's movies in the park, live music, stuff like that. There's going to be an alumni region, so if you've competed in the Southern Alberta Summer Games for Lethbridge, but say you now live in Calgary, you can compete in the alumni region and come back, and there's going to be a special kind of banquet and dinner for the alumni. And then there's also the Heart of a Champion kind of nomination that's going on. So basically, if someone's been involved with the Games for a minimum of 5 years and they've helped build it as either a player, coach, volunteer, any other capacity, they can be nominated, and then the winner is actually going to walk out Team Lethbridge during the opening ceremonies.
We have about 25 events going to be taking place, and they are for anyone of all ages, so anywhere from, let's say, a 7-under track and field or soccer up until, I know my grandma's from Claresholm, so she's registered to play crib, and she's 88 years old. So it really varies, so we definitely have something for everybody.
Registration to volunteer for the Games is now open. You can do so by simply visiting their website, southernalbertagames.com. Tony Roma's in Lethbridge will be closing its doors, but not forever. The restaurant will be moving to the Holiday Inn on Mayor McGrath next month. The location change will bring a big sale.
In our move, we are not taking a lot of the older chairs and tables, so we are having a garage sale sort of at the end of the month around the 29th and 30th, where people come in, take a look, and make us an offer more or less of our tables and chairs. We have some beer fridges, some lights, and pretty well anything that you see when you walk in will be available.
Benetti says the objective is to sell absolutely everything and with very reasonable price tags.
We do have some prices like 4 tables and chairs will be $50, or we got to start somewhere, and hopefully people will agree with those prices and take it away.
Benetti and his staff have also used the revamping of the restaurant as an opportunity to give back to the community.
We just donated it to the MCC thrift store, a lot of the stuff, some to individuals that needed stuff that we said just take it away. And we did sell some of the stuff on Kijiji and stuff too, but most of it went to donations.
We're really excited. It's going to be completely different for us. The same kind of family-like atmosphere, just a little bit different. We'll have a patio, new menu items, a bigger lounge. Everything's brand new, so we're really excited about that.
We have a new location. It'll be a little bit more central than what we are now. It'll be busy over there with that new community of Southbrook. It'll be good, yeah.
The sale at Tony Roma's begins on May 29th at 10 a.m. until everything is gone. For Rich City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
A farmer in Saskatchewan has launched a lawsuit against agribusiness companies Monsanto and Bayer, saying one of the company's products, Roundup, caused his cancer. Tony Merchant was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer that affects white blood cells. The news comes a day after a California couple was awarded just over $2 billion in a similar lawsuit involving Roundup in the United States. Bayer Canada, the company that acquired Monsanto last year, says it is aware of the legal action and would not comment on the case. A Manitoba man was charged close to $6,200 from Expedia for a one-night stay at a Holiday Inn in Minnesota. Justin Smerchansky said he was traveling on business and booked the room online. He said he saw the original listing price of $207.95 Canadian. He made the purchase, but in printing the receipt, he had been charged just over $3,100 in taxes and fees and an additional $2,800 in property fees. In total, his card was charged $6,180.54. Smerchansky said he spent over 8 hours with Expedia on the phone, but he said he was given the runaround. He's now contacted MasterCard, which is trying to get the charges reversed. The Holiday Inn says it is not involved in the billing process when customers book through third-party sites like Expedia. The latest polls have Andrew Scheer and the federal Conservatives with a 7-point lead in popularity on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. What seems to be resonating with many here in the West is Mr. Scheer's support of our energy sector. Parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion says Andrew Scheer has a plan for our oil and gas industry.
Proposal of an east-west energy corridor. So more pipelines, more hydro lines, so that we connect both extremities, both ends of the country, so that Canada can become energy sufficient.
Catch my full interview with Ray Fillion discussing the biggest stories coming out of Ottawa, including the latest with the formal arrest of 2 Canadians. That's coming up after business news. The Mark Norman affair dominated question period in the House of Commons today, fueled by a report that PM Justin Trudeau pushed for an investigation over the leak of cabinet secrets regarding a $700 million shipbuilding contract.
Mr. Speaker, Vice Admiral Mark Norman served this country with honor and distinction for 30 years. Yet these Liberals won't even give him 30 seconds at one committee meeting to tell his story. They're covering up and protecting the Prime Minister and his involvement in this matter. The Globe and Mail revealed today that the Prime Minister is the one who demanded the investigation. Why would the Prime Minister think it's appropriate to politically direct an RCMP investigation?
Mr. Speaker, the member seems to be dumbfounded that as the head of a government, the Prime Minister would be concerned about leaks of cabinet confidence. I would hope that any Prime Minister would be concerned, and that members should understand that when it comes to the RCMP, it is an independent organization, and the decision to launch the investigation was made by the RCMP alone.
For the first time since 1971, Newfoundland and Labrador elected a minority government last night. Dwight Ball's Liberals squeaked by with 20 seats compared to the PC's 15 seats. Conservative leader Ches Crosby says he hopes to topple the government within a year.
The candidates in this election put themselves forward in public office at a very important time in the history of our province. It is important that we work together for the good of all the people of Newfoundland and Labrador.
The tide is going out on the Ball Liberal government.
Yes.
We now have a situation of constitutional instability. Where will this end up? It will not end up with Dwight Ball as Premier of Newfoundland in 1 year from now.
Murder charges have been filed against a woman and her daughter in the death of a pregnant Chicago woman whose baby was cut from her womb.
We're here to announce that 3 individuals have been charged with the brutal murder of missing 19-year-old Marlon Ochoa. On the 7th of May, CPD received a break in the missing person investigation and learned that Miss Ochoa was in communication with one of the offenders, which brought us to the area of 77th and Pulaski. Detectives finally located the remains of a female in a trash can that were later verified to be 19-year-old mother-to-be Marlon Ochoa. Through DNA testing, we are now certain that the child was Miss Ochoa's, and 2 of those responsible have been charged with murder, and 1 has been charged with concealment of a crime.
A man convicted of killing his wife decades ago prayed and sang hymns as he was put to death in Nashville, Tennessee last night. 68-year-old Don Johnson was executed via lethal injection for the 1984 suffocation of his wife.
We could hear sounds, including singing, that Mr. Johnson's attorney says was him singing a hymn. The warden asked if he had any last words, and he uttered a long prayer. I don't have it all down, but he was praying for forgiveness for those participating in the execution. He prayed for all those I have hurt, and then we don't know exactly when the drugs started to flow, but shortly after that. And he asked if he could sing, and he sang 2 hymns. The first was They Will Know We Are Christians by Our Love, and then a second hymn that's soon and very soon we are going to see the King. And the last words that we could hear him say were the 3rd verse of the song, No More Dying There.
A new report by BuzzFeed News says self-help guru Tony Robbins has been accused of sexually harassing many of his fans and staff. The 59-year-old motivational speaker's alleged misconduct includes him having bodyguards troll his audiences for attractive female fans to bring to him. Robbins, who's been married to his second wife since 2001, also has been accused of exposing himself to 2 staffers. Robbins, who's worked with celebrities including Donald Trump and Oprah, says he has never behaved in a reckless or irresponsible manner, intimidated by the false, unfounded allegations suggested by BuzzFeed. The Turkish fiancé of slain journalist Jamal Khashoggi is asking U.S. lawmakers to launch an investigation into his killing and bring those responsible to justice.
Gerçekten çok büyük bir vahşet.
This act, this murder, was a great brutality. And in the last 7-8 months, nothing was done. The legal procedure that Saudi Arabia undertook is not transparent. We still do not know why he was killed. We don't know where his corpse is. The Congress, if it undertakes an international investigation and puts pressure on Saudi Arabia to share the information with the public and the United States, that could be one thing. There should also be sanctions on Saudi Arabia, because the reason Jamal moved to the United States was because there were other people like him in prisons in Saudi Arabia who could not voice their own opinions.
Grumpy Cat, whose sourpuss demeanor became an internet sensation, has died at the age of 7. The famous feline had millions of social media followers, and her owners say she helped people smile all around the world.
Posting on social media Friday, Grumpy Cat's owner said that she experienced complications from a urinary tract infection and passed away peacefully Tuesday. Her owners said Grumpy Cat helped millions of people smile all around the world, even when times were tough. The cat's real name was Tartar Sauce, and she rose to fame after her photos were posted online in 2012. She had more than 2 million followers on Instagram and more than 1 million on Twitter. Her website says her grumpy look was likely because she had a form of dwarfism. Kelly Daschle, Associated Press.
Definitely going to miss Grumpy Cat. There's some great family-friendly movies at the Movie Mill this weekend. With more, here's the owner of the mill, Mr. Len Binning, with another Movie Mill Minute.
The Grizzlies, an inspiring true story about a group of Inuit students faced with some of the highest teen suicide rates in the world. They're introduced to the sport of lacrosse, and together They save the town and themselves.
This is not about you. All of us have made sacrifices to be here. We've been dealing with this stuff for years and we're still here.
Instead of drinking or fighting, we are proud, strong, full of hope.
Who are we?
Family Animation returns with How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. The dragon community is perfect until a new darkness arises, and now Astrid and Hiccup need to save the world by searching for a hidden one.
Wow. It's a hidden dragon world. Toothless, go introduce yourself.
Disney Nature presents Penguins, a coming-of-age story about a penguin named Steve, who, along with millions of other males, travels across the Antarctic to build a nest, to find a mate, and to raise a family.
Disney Nature invites you to join an extraordinary couple fighting to raise a family in one of the most unforgiving and stunning places on Earth. Disney Nature's Penguins.
It was a soggy TGIF today with more showers in the forecast over the next couple of days. Complete weather details are coming up. The backyards are getting greener with all this moisture we've had. More rain expected tonight with a low near 2 degrees. Tomorrow, showers off and on and a high near 7. The rain should end for a while on Sunday with a high expected near 13. Another low pressure system blows in on Victoria Day Monday with the mercury dropping to 10. Tuesday, mainly overcast with a high near 12. The rain returns, but warming up to 15 degrees on Wednesday. Showers and 16 is expected on Thursday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 18 and an average low of 4. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2006 at 31 degrees, and the record low was -3 in 1955. Sunrise was at 5:44, sunset at 9:11. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria will have rain in 18, a good chance of showers in 19 for Vancouver. Periods of rain and only 7 degrees for Calgary tomorrow. A mixture of sun and cloud and 16 for Edmonton. Partly cloudy and 12 degrees for Regina tomorrow. Just a few clouds and 14 for Saskatoon. A mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 11 for Winnipeg on Saturday. Increasing cloud and 15 for Toronto. Ottawa, our nation's capital, will be mainly sunny and 18. Montreal will be mainly cloudy and 17. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have light showers and 12. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have rain and 10. Charlottetown, PEI will also have rain and 6. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, there will be light showers and a high near 8 degrees tomorrow. Our country's year-long standoff with the Trump administration over punitive U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs is finally over. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made a trip to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada's steel manufacturing capital, to make the announcement. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer spoke about the tariffs issue in Ottawa just prior to Trudeau's statement.
Well, obviously, as someone who has a steel plant in my own riding, I know the difficulty that steel workers have gone through for the past several months. Again, we were disappointed that Justin Trudeau was not able to fix this issue during the NAFTA negotiations, why he was in such a position of weakness that he was forced to accept so many concessions from Donald Trump without addressing this issue. So we'll look at the details that's announced today. Obviously, what we would expect would be no tariffs and no quotas. That is a very important issue for Canadians.
A non-profit group has launched a campaign to gain support for efforts to get China to end its restrictions on Canadian shipments of canola, peas, soybeans, and pork. Suits and Boots, made up of farmers, Canadian investors, and resource workers, says it will contact Canadian businesses that work with China. The group says it already has gained 3,700 supporters. Federal Agriculture Minister Marie-Claude Bebeau says she used the recent G20 ministers meeting in Japan to press her Chinese counterpart for evidence behind Beijing's bans on Canadian canola. Seeding continues in many regions across the prairies. In Saskatchewan, the province says 38% of the crop is now in the ground, ahead of the 5-year average of 31% for this time last year. Crops are slow to emerge due to cool conditions. Hay and pasture growth has been slow due to little rainfall and cooler conditions. Winter wheat assessments are continuing as fields green up and temperatures rise. Cross-party talks in Britain aimed at striking a compromise Brexit deal have broken down without an agreement. The opposition Labour Party says talks with PM Theresa May's government have gone as far as they can. The two sides have held weeks of negotiations to see if they can agree on terms for Britain's exit from the EU that can actually win support in Parliament. Britain was due to leave the EU on March 29th, but Brexit has been delayed until October 31st amid the political impasse. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the year-long tariff war between Canada and the United States is almost over. In a statement today, the Canadian government said the two sides have agreed to eliminate tariffs within 2 days. The deal applies to the tariffs the U.S. imposed last June of 25% on imports of steel and 10% on aluminum. Canada will also drop the retaliatory tariffs on steel, aluminum, and other consumer products. Federal Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has outlined his vision for the economy. Our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Come to the Nikayuko Japanese Garden for Victoria Day on Monday, May 20th. From 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., enjoy fun activities for the whole family, such as guided tours, kite making, minyo dancing, and try an Okinawa donut. For more details, visit nikayuko.com. The Great Canadian Garage Sale is taking place Saturday, May 18th from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Exhibition Park's main pavilion. Admission is $8 or $6 with a non-perishable food donation to the Lethbridge Food Bank. Each admission ticket has a chance to win amazing prizes, such as a 55-inch smart TV, a drone, a stereo, and home theater system. Come out for some great deals and help support a worthy cause. If you love the game of golf, get involved and be a volunteer at the second annual Lethbridge Paradise Canyon Open, a Mackenzie Tour PGA Tour Canada event, June 20th to the 23rd. There are a number of positions needed to be filled, and you'll gain the experience of being a part of a professional golf tournament. To learn more about volunteering for this event, visit lethbridgepcopen.ca or call Michelle at 403-327-5724. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, the two Canadians who have been held for a number of months in China, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, have now both been officially arrested. Joining me now to discuss this, along with other big stories coming out of Ottawa, is our parliamentary reporter Ray Fillion. Ray, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's doing everything in his power to help the two Michaels, but what does that entail?
Well, the Prime Minister was asked about it while he was in Paris on Thursday. He held a news conference there in the French capital, and it's not exactly clear what he's going to do about this. Of course, as you know, for weeks there have been many calls by the opposition parties, by many other people, for the Prime Minister to pick up the phone and just call his Chinese counterparts. But, you know, for now, he's publicly condemning yet again what the Chinese have done. He's calling those arrests arbitrary. He said on Thursday that it's increasingly clear that the Chinese government is not following the same kinds of rules and principles that a large majority of democracies follow around the world. So he's trying to put some pressure on Beijing. But it looks like it's not yielding any results, at least not for now. And of course, the formal arraignment of those two Canadians who have been detained in China since early December, ever since Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou, the senior Huawei executive. Canada's woes with China have only been growing. As you know, two other Canadians have been sentenced to death, which is something Canada is also protesting. China is also blocking imports of canola. So, pressure is only building. The tensions are only going higher and higher between Ottawa and Beijing, and we don't know exactly what Ottawa is going to do to make things better soon.
So what have the two Michaels officially been charged with? Is it stealing state secrets?
Yeah, spying and crimes related to national security. This is what they're being charged with. People behind the scenes say it doesn't make any sense. We're sensing that it has, it's a way for China to retaliate following the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the senior Huawei executive in Vancouver. So as long as Canada won't release her, which is not something the Canadian government is prepared to do, because Justin Trudeau keeps repeating over and over to China and to everyone else that Canada's judicial system is totally independent from the political system, doesn't look like China is willing to accept that.
Now, our Prime Minister has offered Canadian products for the rebuilding of the Paris Notre Dame Cathedral. Ray, how much lumber and steel are we talking about here?
Well, we don't know. I mean, there's lots of questions to be answered still. I asked the Prime Minister's office exactly how much this is going to cost, how much softwood lumber we're talking about here, how much steel. Right now, what I'm being told is just an offer that the Prime Minister made to the French President, Mr. Macron. He went, as you know, in front of the cathedral in Paris, which was devastated by a fire exactly a month ago, to offer Canada's help. And he mentioned Canadian softwood, Canadian steel. This is an announcement that he made in partnership with the industry, we're told, but we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost and who's going to pay for what. Is this something that the Canadian government is going to foot the bill for, perhaps in conjunction with the industry here in Canada? A lot of questions left to be answered where that offer is concerned. But at least Canada is doing something. The Prime Minister mentioned that it's not just a French monument that was heavily damaged by fire last month. It's a World Heritage Site, so at least he's showing that Canada is willing to do something about it.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer outlined his vision for the economy on Thursday. What did he have to say, Ray?
Well, he wants to scrap the carbon tax. No surprise there. He's been talking about it for many, many months. He wants to do away also with Justin Trudeau's economic policy, with one notable exception, which is the Canada Child Benefit, which is very popular with parents who have kids. As you know, they're getting tax-free money from the Canadian government. But one of the main takeaways from Mr. Scheer is his proposal of an east-west energy corridor. So more pipelines, more hydro lines, so that we connect both extremities, both ends of the country, so that Canada can become energy sufficient here. Mr. Scheer wants Canada to be an energy independent country with this east-west energy corridor. A move, he says, would make building pipelines and other energy infrastructure easier. So obviously, you're going to hear a lot of the opposition parties, the Liberals, but particularly the Greens and the NDP, who are against pipelines, attack that plan. But yeah, we're not done from hearing about that. This is a plan that Mr. Scheer plans to flesh out in the coming months leading up to the October election.
Let me tell you, as an Albertan, a native Albertan, want to hear more pipelines. Hey, I'm all for it. And especially a lot of my family works in the energy sector here in our beautiful province.
It's a big debate across the country. I mean, you go elsewhere. I mean, in Western Canada, obviously, pipelines are very popular. Not so in British Columbia, not so in Quebec. It's a very sore subject right now. And Mr. Scheer is trying to win extra seats in the province of Quebec. The word pipeline has become toxic in that province ever since they had the big debate about Energy East. The premier over there, you'll recall what François Legault said just before Christmas. He says he doesn't want to have dirty oil, dirty energy from Alberta. So he says there's no social acceptability for another pipeline in Quebec. So this is probably a debate that's going to come to head in the next election campaign. For
Absolutely.
Sure.
You know, it's really interesting as well. A lot of the people I talk to in the energy sector say, yeah, we don't mind giving transfer payments to Quebec. Just let us earn our money first. That dirty oil money they're just talking about. Then we'll send you the millions of dollars, right? So anyway, we'll save that discussion. Yeah, for another time. Ray, the Mark Norman controversy is not going away anytime soon, and now the feds are denying any role in the mess. And let me guess, they're blaming former Prime Minister Stephen Harper again?
Well, they wouldn't blame the previous Harper government, but this week, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet ministers repeated over and over again that they had absolutely no role in the decision to indict Mr. Norman. They say it was the role of the RCMP and solely of the RCMP to investigate. It is the Crown prosecutors who decide to lay a breach of trust charge against the former number 2 of the Canadian Armed Forces, Vice Admiral Norman. But, you know, some interesting things were said this week. In an interview with the CBC, former Conservative Defence Minister Peter MacKay revealed that Mr. Norman, Vice Admiral Norman, actually had the green light from the previous Conservative government to speak with the Davie shipyard in the Quebec City area. And this is very interesting because one of the things that he was accused of having done was to have leaked secrets, government secrets, to that shipyard. Now, if he had been given the go-ahead to speak with the shipyard, why was he charged with leaking government secrets to the Davie shipyard? And why didn't a former Conservative, you know, go and talk to the Mounties or to the Crown prosecutors? I mean, the Conservatives this week responded, well, nobody asked us. It was the investigators' role to come to us and ask us about it. But for sure, some people, it looks to me like some people have some questions to answer. Is it the RCMP or the Crown prosecutors? It looks to me like someone didn't do a very thorough job in this case. Right.
Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland met with her U.S. counterpart Robert Lighthizer recently to talk about the U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Ray, are the huge tariffs finally coming to an end?
Well, we're hearing some encouraging words from both the Mexicans and the Americans. Earlier this week, a Mexican official said the tariffs, which apply to Canadian steel and aluminum, but also to Mexican steel and aluminum, are about to be lifted. Then the next day, U.S. Commerce Secretary Steven Mnuchin told a Senate hearing in Washington that the tariffs could very soon be lifted. So, you know, encouraging words. But the problem is Chrystia Freeland, who was in the American Capitol this week, she didn't sound so enthusiastic. She said talks are continuing. As you mentioned, she had a long discussion with U.S. Commerce, the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, and it looks like more discussions are still to be had. So it kind of looks to me like the U.S. is close to having a deal with Mexico, but maybe not Canada. Maybe they want something in return from Ottawa, which is perhaps not something Ottawa's willing to give the Americans. But yeah, it's encouraging, but it looks like we're not done there yet.
Child killer Terry Lynn McClintic is now suing the federal government. Is it because she wanted maybe more time at that Saskatchewan Healing Lodge? What are you hearing?
Yeah, it was a big controversy a few months ago when it was revealed that child killer Terry Lynn McClintic was actually spending time not in jail but at a healing lodge in Saskatchewan. And then she was later removed and sent back to jail. And Ms. McClintic sent an application over the past couple of weeks claiming that the decision to return her to prison was unreasonable, procedurally unfair, and therefore unlawful. She said she suffered a loss of liberty by being returned to prison. However, just as the judge was about to rule on this motion from Ms. McClintic, it turns out she retracted her application. So it doesn't look like she's willing to sue the federal government anymore. She's back in prison. Looks like she's had a change of heart. And as you know, she won't be eligible for parole until 2031. So it doesn't look like Ottawa's being sued after all.
The feds are boasting about the current state of the Canadian economy. But you know, Ray, many would argue the turnaround of the economy is more to do with small and medium-sized businesses and not so much about Ottawa.
Yeah, some people are saying that. A lot of other people are also saying that Canada's economy is doing well right now because the American economy is doing extremely well. We see what's happening, obviously, south of the border. And whenever the economy there does well, it has a positive effect on this side of the border. But yeah, Statistics Canada, nevertheless, gave the Liberals some reasons to boast with their most recent employment numbers, those for April, which show that the economy added 106,000 jobs. That's the biggest one-month employment surge in Canada ever since Statistics Canada has been keeping stats, and they've been at it since 1976. But the reality is, whatever the cause for this, the Canadian economy is doing well at the moment, and that can only be good news for the government of the day. It's when the economy sours that the government of the day is in trouble. So far, so good. Good news for the Liberals.
Now, speaking of the Liberals, they're wanting to declare a federal climate emergency, and so did the NDP. Ray, what does that look like, a federal climate emergency?
Yeah, the battle of the motions this week in the House of Commons. First, the NDP tabled its motion, which is proposing to do away with subsidies to oil and gas companies. So according to the Liberals, that's going way too far. I don't have to tell you, obviously, what the Conservatives' position on this is. And then the Liberals also tabled their own motion to declare a climate emergency. What I think this is all about, it's just a political game. That's what it is, because we talked last week about the Green Party, which is doing extremely well, especially among people on the left who believe strongly that something drastic needs to be done about the environment. The younger generation is very pro-environment. So I think the NDP and the Liberals are sensing that right now. They're afraid that they might lose the Green vote, Elizabeth May's party. So I think that that's the reason why we have this battle of the motions this week in the House of Commons. And it's also a move on the part of the Liberals to try and put pressure on Andrew Scheer, which is yet to make his environmental plan public. Mind you, let me remind you once again that Mr. Scheer is promising to do so before the end of the spring. We're going to know exactly, we're told, what the Conservatives' targets for reducing Canada's greenhouse gas emissions will be.
Now, we all remember the Aga Khan controversy, Ray. It sounds like the Aga Khan Foundation is receiving a lot less money from the feds than it has in the past.
Absolutely. It's been cut almost in half, $24.8 million last year compared to $47.4 million in 2016-17 and $53.6 million the year before. So we're talking about much less money. The government says it has nothing to do with the Prime Minister's trip to the Aga Khan's private island from a few years ago, and the raking over the coals that he got from the former ethics commissioner. Foreign Affairs saying it's just the normal cycle of business. It all depends on the project. Each group that they do business with is working on. Where the money is needed is where the money goes, basically, is what they're saying. They say that the Aga Khan Foundation remains a very important partner, even though it's getting much less money these days.
How about the over $200 million we're still giving to China, even though now Michael Kovrig and Michael Spafford have been arrested?
Yeah, a lot of big debate on that. Yeah.
Our parliamentary reporter, Ray Fillion, joining me once again from Ottawa. Thanks so much, Ray.
You're welcome, Hal.
Universities were for many years known to be the places where free thought and speech were championed. Vigorous debates on controversial topics were welcomed and expected. Today, the opposite seems to be true. Controversial opinions are not always welcome. Our guests today have some very strong opinions on this. John Carpe is president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, and Catherine Furukawa, one of our regular BCN contributors. Welcome both to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
John, the good news is that our new Alberta government has made a pledge to hold public universities responsible for protecting free expression on campus. But will they face a lot of opposition to this from student unions and maybe some of the teacher faculties?
I think they'll face some opposition from some people, but by and large, the taxpayers and I think most students on campus would be pleased to see some legislation in place to protect campus free speech and to hold universities accountable to fulfilling their own mission.
Now, can you give us some examples of how universities really shut down free speech on controversial issues?
Well, we saw at the University of Alberta in 2015, a small campus pro-life club put up a stationary display, and it was surrounded by a loud chanting mob, holding up sheets and towels and making it impossible for any debate or conversation to take place. And even though this was clearly contrary to the university's own rules, the university took no disciplinary action against any of the students. A few years earlier, we had a similar problem, pro-life club at the University of Calgary, with the campus administration threatening to expel them for doing nothing other than simply expressing their views peacefully on campus. So university presidents are failing to stand up for free speech, and the Justice Center has presented model legislation, proposed legislation to the Legislative Assembly and asked them to adopt a law that is going to require universities to actually uphold free speech on campus or else face some hefty fines.
Did you or any of your family members run into issues when it came to free speech at a post-secondary institution, Catherine?
My sister right now is actually at the University of Regina and has encountered this a couple of times, she said, in class, where she'll maybe offer an opposing view, maybe a more conservative viewpoint, and is immediately shut down and not always, but often not encouraged to share her point of view that's differing from professors, from classmates, and yeah, hasn't had that opportunity to share as you would, as other groups maybe are.
So it's impacted your family personally then?
Yeah.
Right. Now, John, to support the Alberta government pledge, the Justice Centre has submitted a policy paper to the Legislative Assembly. Can you give us a brief outline of your suggestions?
Yes, we suggest to the Legislative Assembly to pass a law that defines what free speech is and is not on campus. So, for example, to heckle and disrupt and physically obstruct somebody else's display is not bona fide exercise of free speech. The legislation would also empower the Minister of Advanced Education to levy fines up to $50,000 for first offense in cases where universities are allowing a mob to run wild and shut down a debate or a display or an event. And so we actually need legislation with some teeth in it that's going to hold universities accountable to the large sums of money that they are getting from taxpayers.
Catherine, let me ask you something. Do you think $50K is enough of a fine, of a deterrent, or should we maybe think $100,000?
I don't know. I guess it maybe depends on the institution, and I think if some personal responsibility was taken, not just by the university itself, but by those who are acting in a way that's not encouraging free speech, maybe it is enough. I don't know.
John, what do you think, $50K, or should we go a little bit higher with that?
On a second or third offense, it can go up to $100,000. So $50,000 is the maximum for a first offense. But if a university continues to disrespect free speech by allowing the disruption of events, by allowing hecklers to pull a fire alarm, that sort of thing, if the university is not decisive against that. The other thing is that this law prohibits universities from targeting innocent parties with hefty security fees. For example, the University of Alberta has told a campus pro-life group they cannot have a display on campus unless they pay $17,500 in security fees, which of course is completely unaffordable for the group. And what this law will do is make sure that universities do not target the innocent, because the people who should pay that security fee are the ones that are disrupting events and obstructing events and organizing disruption on Facebook and Twitter.
Now, John, you say this freedom of speech legislation would actually help Alberta attract the brightest of scholars and researchers?
Considering the abysmal state with political correctness growing more and more, universities like the University of Chicago that have taken a stance for free speech and against political correctness, I think are going to attract good students. And I think the same would hold true of the universities in Alberta.
You know, I simply don't understand why any self-respecting university would be afraid to allow politically incorrect speech on campus. Is it not about creating a discussion? Catherine, what do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I understand that there's a difference between an opinion and facts that are potentially being presented by professors in class, but certainly I think that that's how we grow and we learn, when we're able to share our opinion, hear somebody else's opinion. It teaches us empathy and understanding, and I think it's so important in our post-secondary institutions to have that freedom of speech.
Catherine, you're a mom, you've got two girls, age 5 and 3. Are you concerned as well about their freedom of speech once they reach the university and college campus age?
Absolutely. I mean, they are currently being raised in a faith-based home with some conservative perspectives, and it seems that often those are the groups that are not being allowed to share their opinions, and we're trying to teach them to be open to what other people have to say, and I think that if that's not reciprocated to them, for sure, as a mama bear, I would not be very happy to hear that that was going on while they're at university or college or wherever they go to study.
John, still on the topic of freedom of speech, pro-life film Unplanned is not receiving any major distribution here in Canada, so people are not even getting a chance to see it. The film is based on the true story of Abby Johnson and how she went from being the director of Planned Parenthood to being someone who now fights for the unborn. Is this not censorship if we can't see the movie here in our own country?
It is censorship, but not on the part of government and not in a way that makes it impossible to see the film. I think it's disappointing in a way that the movie theaters are quite selective in who feels offended by what. There's all kinds of films that come out that would be very offensive to people of faith, and movie theater, if it got complaints, would just shrug its shoulders. And here is a film that's going to be offensive to those who have strongly pro-choice views on abortion. Fortunately, it's not government that is doing the censoring, so we're not at risk of getting fined or having to spend time in jail for viewing the film or for distributing it. And there's ways to bypass the movie theater. I mean, this movie could, potentially go on to Netflix or other online sources, some kind of pay-for-view type of scenario. So it's going to be next to impossible to fully censor the film. People who want to see it will be able to see it, and the producers of the film would be able to use alternative technology, even though it's not being shown in theaters. It also occurs to me that large churches, like Calgary, Edmonton, other cities have big churches, could have a screening for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people. So that also is a possibility.
We also chatted with the owner of the Movie Mill here in Lethbridge. It's an independent movie studio, and he talked about potentially bringing Unplanned to the Movie Mill as well, so stay tuned. We may have more details on that. But Catherine, how does that make you feel that the larger movie theaters are deciding what you can and cannot see?
I think it just comes back again to that, is freedom of speech really free? Is it a select groups that get the right of freedom of speech? And if so, yeah, it's not free and it's not fair, and I think it's definitely something that we need to be speaking up about and figuring out.
John, let's switch up gears for just a moment here. You filed a court application on the behalf of 2 individuals and a business challenging a bylaw of the Municipal District of Foothills. This has to do with the large pro-life billboard signs on parked semi-trailers on the side of highways. I see them when I go out to Calgary all the time. Tell me more about that.
Well, the Foothills Municipal District has banned advertising on trailers on private property, but at the same time, it allows Pattison signs and other commercial signs, some of which are very bright, very colorful, electronic signs with a rotating display. And I think the municipal district has to, think through if this is really dangerous for driving, if it's dangerous for distracting drivers, maybe we should pass a law banning all signs. Or conversely, if it's not dangerous, if it's not causing a significant distraction, maybe we should allow all signs. But what the municipal district is doing is targeting signs on trailers on private property, but allowing companies like Pattison to put up much brighter and bolder signs along the side of the highways. So it's an untenable double standard, and we believe that it violates the free expression guarantee of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Yeah, because I mean, as a landowner, this is my private property. Let's say if you own that property, Catherine, out in the country, don't you feel you have the right to put whatever you wanted on your own property?
Absolutely. I was actually just talking to somebody about this with the election who said, well, everybody in my community has signs up that are different than mine. I don't want to offend them. And the conversation went, well, what about all your neighbors potentially offending you by their choice of sign? I mean, it is your right on your property to display your opinion, I guess, as long as you do it in a respectful manner. And
So, John, is there any particular bylaw specifically aimed at pro-life signs? And if so, would it be helpful for concerned citizens to contact their municipal district councillors and let them know how they really feel about this?
Oh, absolutely. People should call their elected representatives. It's too bad that a law has to be taken to court, but it's the politicians themselves that can amend the law, and they can do so quite easily. And it's not about probably the expression is being targeted because it's pro-life, but we don't really know that for sure. But apart from the pro-life advertising that is on some of these trailers, the bigger issue is a double standard. Either the signs distract drivers and perhaps we should ban all of them, or they're not dangerous and we allow all of them. But politicians can correct the current problem, which is to allow the bright electronic commercial Pattison signs while going after private landowners.
Let's squeeze in one more here. You've also asked that the provincial government repeal a gag law that the NDP put in place, which severely restricts third-party political advertising. What are the problems with this gag law?
Gag law forces nonprofit groups to publicly post the names of their donors and where their donors live. So if a group like, say, Parents for Choice in Education wanted to run some radio ads informing the public about, what's wrong with the parent secrecy laws that, require teachers and principals to withhold secrets from parents about their own kids. If Parents for Choice in Education wanted to run those ads, they would have to list, or they would have to tell Elections Alberta, and Elections Alberta would list on its website the names of anybody giving $250 or more towards the advertising campaign. What that does is it severely violates the privacy rights of citizens to be able to support the cause of their own choice, but not necessarily be public about it, in the same way that we have a secret ballot and we don't have to disclose publicly who you vote for, because if we did, it could lead to intimidation and bullying and all kinds of problems. So hopefully a new government will repeal these gag law provisions that hamper grassroots organizations from running advertising campaigns.
Catherine, let me ask you, as a concerned citizen, would you feel that'd be a violation of your rights?
100%. I mean, I don't show you my bank statement. Why, this is no different, as far as I'm concerned, so.
So, John, what kind of response are you getting from the government so far on your policy papers?
Well, it's just been in the last 10 days that we have submitted the 2 different papers, so no response yet. But there are private members who are looking at putting bills forward, and they now have at least 2 more options to consider, and as does the government as well, because the government will be bringing forth a lot of legislation as well, starting on Tuesday, May 21st.
John Carpe, President of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, and BCN contributor Catherine Furukawa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.